There we go. So what we just did was a ceremony, the taking refuge. It's a thing we repeat over and over. It's a short ceremony. The I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha, and then repeating the promises. It has a posture and a gesture of the hands, in Gasho or Anjali, hands together at the level of the heart. Um, so we started with a question about ceremony, and I wanted to introduce this conversation about sadhana practice, since we're heading towards doing the practice of the sadhana of Mahamudra together. And I thought, let's start at the very beginning. And this is a little bit of an overview with some of the immediate way, the flavor of the immediate way in it, or the taste of the immediate way, what it's like to be a Vajrayana or immediate way meditator. And it helps to go back and take a lightning fast look at the foundation and the great way. In the foundation, basically what gets pointed out over and over again is that you are not a rock. You are not a permanent, solid, independent, forever experience. You're not forever, you had a start and you will have an end. And it's not unchanging. I use rock as a metaphor because rocks appear to not change. Actually, they do change, but you get the idea, right? That you're constantly changing. So you're not a forever unchanging experience. This very dynamic, moment to moment, what it's like to be alive and to be a human being. So we say a lot in community refuge, more like a river than a rock. It's constantly flowing and changing and very dynamic. So you're not, you could say, real, like a rock. You're more like a river. And then the Great Way teachings point out not only are you more like a river, but all of experience is more like a river. It's all wide open. There's no thing to hold on to. It's empty of rock-like things to hold on to, but it's wide open and dynamic and constantly changing and full of possibility. Anything could happen. Sometimes that wide open, empty of rock, full of possibility is called emptiness. It's a translation of a concept shunyata. And if you get the wide open, empty, full of potential possibilities, you begin to notice you're connected with everything else, and compassion naturally arises. And so the Great Way teachings focus on what we call in community refuge open, empty, full, shunyata, and compassion. So you're not a rock, that's the foundation. Everything is open, empty, full, and that leads to compassion. That's the Great Way. And now we're at the immediate way. And one of the assumptions of the immediate way is that the potential for experiencing what it's like to be truly awake and completely open-hearted and full of the good, expression of what it's like to be a human being, that's already within you as a seed of potential, or like a seed of potential. You could call that Buddha nature. And that seed will blossom and grow if you get whatever's blocking it out of the way. It's hard to grow love when you're fixated on anger. And so you might have to work at letting go of anger to give love some room to grow. It's that simple, right? So you get the obstacles out of the way and you try to, grow and nurture the potential. And then in the immediate way, the Vajrayana practice, there are several techniques or skillful ways to do that have been handed down from generation to generation for over 2 millennia, for over 2,000 years. And depending on who you listen to, some of these are 4,000 years old or 6,000 years old, or, let's not get caught in the calendar. They're old and they've been handed down for a long time from one generation of masters to the next, ordinary people. Oh, if you do the ceremony, if you do it this way, then that potential will grow. And they use ceremony. which is why I started with the question of let's think about an ordinary ceremony. And we came up with lots of them, like lots of gratitude for coming home or having a house. Um, uh, if you see something that's been hurt, saying the Mani mantra, the Om Mani Padme Hum, as a blessing. I loved opening the blinds to let the light in, like as a daily greeting of the day ceremony. Um, you know, Kissing your wife goodbye, even though you know you're going to see each other, an hour or so later. The self-care ceremony of putting in eye drops, right? And there was another one, watching the sunrise, right, or the sunset. Um, they're all very natural, very human. Um, if you're looking for some kind of religious ceremony, and there are plenty of religious ceremonies, they're not specifically religious, but they do have this ceremonial aspect of something you do in a set way that you repeat over and over. So part of having a ceremony is it's an action or a prayer or a gesture or a thing that you do, right? It does involve some doing, right? And you do it over and over, even if you only do it twice. One of the examples was a marriage ceremony. Well, you repeat the same action, a second time, right? Um, so it's something you do in a there's a set way to do it, right? And that's repeated. I think one of the tragedies of our culture, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, is that we've lost a lot of ceremony. And so we live in a culture that is challenged to have real ceremonies. We do things, but it's almost as if we don't believe the depth of the ceremony, the importance of what's happening. I saw a picture of a graduation ceremony, of a high school graduation ceremony the other day. And it's not important, though, who was graduating and all of that, but it just looked like they'd thrown away any of the meaning. It was just this young person walking across the stage, and, that was it. uh, they could have been walking across the stage with no one there, with no one to witness. It was sort of empty. It didn't have any, I like to think of it as gravity, heaviness, heavy with meaning, right? It was just another moment for them, as if they didn't care about it. So ceremonies have the idea of something that you do over and over that you care about, that has a meaning, and that you've given some meaning to. Oftentimes in spiritual traditions, those type of ceremonies that you do over and over that have a meaning that you've really given a lot of energy to, they become a ritual. It's another word to describe what you're doing. And here's one that nobody talked about, but you've seen 1,000 times in one form or another. If you've ever watched a baseball game or a basketball game or football or tennis or any, sporting activity, but I'm going to stick with baseball to just do one example. And the batter comes up to bat, and they hold their bat, they tap it on the plate, they shake their body this way or that, they put back their hair. They have some ritual that they do every time. And what they're saying to themselves with that repeated action is they have trained themselves that when I hold the bat this way and I move my shoulders that way and I push my hair back this way, I'm ready. They are prompting a particular psychological, spiritual state of readiness so that they can hit the pitch. They don't just walk up and go, oh, ho hum, another day, right? Like you never see that, right? And we're just talking baseball, right? But you see the same thing in almost every sport, right? That they have some preliminary warm up ritual that they do. Um, I don't know about you. When I cook, I have a ritual. I like to clean the counter and put away any dishes that are on the counter before I bring out the ingredients and start the next meal. because my ritual is I get confused enough. I like to clean the space, which is my getting ready. And that, that the meaning that it has is I care about it and I'm adding energy into this experience. So the ritual of a repeated set of gestures and activities that you do as a ceremony that gives meaning and puts your mind in a particular frame of reference. And one of the things that the Vajrayana, or the immediate way, is famous for is that it uses this kind of detail of just what it's like to be a human being. Like, yes, I know I'm not a rock. Back to the foundation teachings. And yes, I know that everything is flowing and wide open and full of potential, and that I'm connected with everything and there's natural compassion. There's the Great Way teachings. And I cook a better meal when I start with a clean counter, right? And that cleaning opens me up to pay really deep attention and to let the best qualities of being a human being come forward. So that using of the details, and we're talking about the details of being a human being, the Vajrayana, or the immediate way, uses them all. We have bodies, and so we use our body. We take a particular posture, we're physical gestures. We have minds. So we use our mind to create an imagination, right? A remembered image or idea or experience. We speak, so we recite sacred words over and over. We repeat gestures. We're using the full experience. We bring in some emotion, right? Some memory. So we have our bodies, our memories, our feelings, our speech, our thoughts. Whatever you can do to bring in being a full human being to the ceremony and the ritual, you can use that to wake up. So that's one of the skillful means of Vajrayana. It's why it goes so fast. You could spend a lot of time in the foundation way trying to know you're not a rock, and you're trying to maybe separate yourself from that rock feeling. You might come a little closer in the great way, but it can still take a long time. In the immediate path, which is why I like to translate Vajrayana as immediate path, hey, you can just be there. And these series of rituals or ceremonies that have been inherited and passed down from one teacher to the next carry with them meaning that can take you to that full potential. Now, here's a secret. You don't need ceremony. If you or I were completely bright and ready, you could just wake up and be open-hearted. It's possible. But if you're like me and most other people, the ceremonies can help. And if you've tasted that complete awakening, the ceremonies are an interesting doorway to go through and find it again and play with it or dance with it. So there's a playful, exploratory, energetic quality. And all of that is contained in the idea of a sadhana, a series of rituals or ceremonial activities, chants, mantras, gestures that are repeated, right, to take you to a particular spiritual experience. One of my favorite authors, who was a Christian, who was a Jesuit priest who spent a lot of time in India, he translated it as spiritual training. So if you're already enlightened, you don't need training. That was I could just be awake. But if you want training, sadhana practice is an interesting way to do it. And the way it does it, and I'm almost done what I wanted to share for today, is it will give you a liturgy, a ceremony. Liturgy is just another word for ceremony. And formal gestures, and you follow this pattern, right? And they have a pattern. There's a famous pattern in a lot of Buddhist liturgies called the 7-branch prayer, that includes being humble in the face of the lineage, like appreciating the lineage, admitting anything that's gotten in the way, making an offering of appreciation for the teachings, expressing admiration for the teachings, asking for the teacher to bestow the teachings, um, and then dedicating whatever goodness came out of it. I might have missed one, but it's got this pattern, and it has Buddhist names for all of those: prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting to teach, asking to remain, and dedicating the merit. And if you look at most sadhana practices, they have 5 to 7 of the 7 branch prayer in them. They'll follow that sequence. Right? And so there's a pattern that you follow. Right? Um, and it helps. There are, like I said, one doesn't need to do sadhana, right? But I find it very helpful as a meditator. Um, it helps if you show up to do a sadhana to actually play the game, that's being played, to not fight with the sadhana. Oh, I want it to be this way. I don't want to do the 7 branch prayer. I want to do something else, right? And we're in a culture that emphasizes individualism and autonomy and personal expression, and the sadhana doesn't care. So one of my meditation teachers said, it's a lot like improv comedy. You have to follow the rules of the game. So if you show up to play baseball, back to my baseball thing, then you show up to play baseball. You don't, start trying to tackle the pitcher as if you were playing football. Uh, when the pitch is thrown, you don't just drop the bat and run in the wrong direction, right? There are rules to the game. If you do that, your friends, at least I grew up playing a lot of baseball, they'll try to correct you, and then after that, they won't invite you to play. It'll be, you don't play very well, right? So if you show up to play the sadhana game, right, and it's playful, right, but it's play that has a rule. You show up and you do the game, right? So all of that idea, and it's a loose collection of ideas about ceremony and ritual and spiritual training and going along with the game. That's what I wanted to share today to open up this conversation. Next week, we'll specifically get into the sadhana and what it's about. But I thought it would be useful to talk about sadhana practice in general and spiritual practice in the Vajrayana in general. That we're going to use everything that we have and we're going to try and bring it into play in a playful form that takes us to that place where our full potential can open and we can get past our obstacles. So that's what I had to share. And I'd love to hear if you have anything, if that inspires anything in you, or if you have sadhana experience you want to talk about, or whatever you would like to share.